Welcome to another Conscious Builder Live here. And today we have Jason Burggraaf on with us. Jason graduated from political science here in Ottawa at Carleton University, and he worked for the Canadian Home Builders Association for 15 years before he joined the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, or GOBA for short, as the executive director almost 2 years to the date. So it'll be 2 years ago on Thursday. We just found out where he spends now. He spends the majority of his time reviewing city policy, bylaws, meetings with members, and crafting submissions to city committees and staff. And doesn't really sound that exciting, but it is very important work, and he likes to do it. So that's what counts.
That's right.
So thanks for being here, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
Personally, I joined GOBA about 10 years ago, and when I started this business, and I've received a tremendous amount of value, but not necessarily from all the meetings that you do to talk on behalf of a lot of the builders. Because, being a custom home builder and a renovator, the issues that we have is a little bit different. But the value that I've received is like learning from other industry experts or guys that have been in the business, and women who have been in the business longer than I have, right? So I learned from them, and I think I've helped them out a little bit too, especially with all the technology that we now have to use because all of our meetings are like this, right? So it's been great. And I chaired the Reno Council for 2 years as well, and learned a lot doing that as well. But today we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. We're going to touch on a few things like intensification, 613 flats, prefab construction, and something called energy evolution. And to get us going, we have a little bit of video. But Jason, you have an important job with city voting this week to extend the urban boundary of Ottawa. And for a quick primer and to kind of start our conversation, we figured we would start with a quick video by Joanne Cianello. I believe I got her last name correct. From CBC. And we're just going to play that here, and then we'll continue our conversation after that.
There is an invisible belt around the outskirts of Ottawa that determines where houses can be built. It's called the urban boundary. As part of Ottawa's new official plan, City Council will debate whether to loosen the belt and build more houses in the suburbs, or keep it tight and only allow growth within the existing boundary. Ottawa's population is now 1 million, and we're set to grow to 1.4 million by 2046. That means 200,000 more homes. But where will they go? The city is already bumping up against farmers' fields. Some worry that urban sprawl would increase Ottawa's greenhouse gas emissions, with people living further from work and commuting by car. The city is already trying to intensify the number of people living in existing neighborhoods, especially near LRT stations. Some argue that intensification needs to increase, with more people living in apartment buildings. But are families in Ottawa ready for European-style apartment living? How do you think Ottawa should grow?
All right, so maybe give a little bit of background, some of the stuff, because you've been sitting in meetings, on Zoom calls or or whatever software it is, for
3 days.
For how long? Sorry,
three full days.
So you get that chair's getting a good little workout.
Right. Well, essentially, what we're trying to do is look at the population growth over the next 25 years. City staff say that's going to be about 400,000 people. To accommodate all those people, to house them, they figure we need about 195,000 homes, new homes. And the question is how do you put all those homes in Ottawa? How many go into existing neighborhoods or intensification or densifying neighborhoods? And how much land do we need to accommodate new homes in new communities? So that's been the real question over the past couple of weeks. As I said, there was basically 3 days, 2 days of public delegations who spoke to those questions, and then a full day of staff questions as well. And then tomorrow, City Council will decide on their growth management strategy. And that'll give staff the guidelines to which to go away and start drafting up the official plan, which will guide growth in the city for the next 25 years.
So what exactly are they voting on? Are they voting on, is there like different plans that are being presented and then they're voting on that? Or how would this work?
Staff are recommending a strategy of moving intensification from 40% where we are now to 60% over the 25 years. So right now, say 40% of all new homes are built in existing neighborhoods. They're saying, let's graduate that up to 60% of all new homes being built by 2046 inside existing neighborhoods. And let's add, they've recommended 1,200 hectares for new communities. That way you'd accommodate that 195,000 homes.
Yeah, so I think this is really important. Like, obviously, we're talking about Ottawa, but this is something that happens in every major city across country, right?
Yeah,
so,
every town, every municipality, every little town everywhere has to decide how they're going to accommodate population growth. And Ottawa's a popular destination right now.
Yeah, for sure. Has there been, like, when all of this was originally planned, I'm assuming it was before COVID-19, right? This would have been scheduled and these meetings were going to happen one way or another. People have been planning this and working on something for a while. Are things now changing with COVID-19 and the fact that a lot of us are in self-isolation? So are people for intensification, or are they like, no, you know what, let's spread out a little bit more, or, you know, split down the middle? You know, what are you seeing in these meetings?
The plans haven't really changed due to COVID-19. I don't think there's much anticipation, especially, say, from city staff, that over the long term, COVID-19 or similar concerns will affect housing demand. I tend to agree with that. I don't think it'll have a tremendous effect on that. And we were talking not just about homes that are going to be built in the next year, right, but homes that are going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So there'll be lots of considerations more than just COVID-19. But it does speak to, when we talk about intensification, about the need for green space and community amenities and what is walkable around your neighborhood and how dense you do want to get. There are people who did bring that up over the 2 days, and it's a legitimate question. So it's in the minds of everyone, but I don't expect it to really alter growth plans in any significant way.
Right. Now, with intensification, like, say that did jump, you know, that flip happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes from 40 to 60, because right now it's the opposite.
Right.
What does that mean for people living inside of that boundary?
So it's not, I'll clarify that it's not just, you know, inside the greenbelt. It's the urban boundary is everything inside the greenbelt, but then also Canada, Barrhaven, Manotick, everywhere within the city. Not the limits, but it's the divide between rural lands within the city. So the urban boundary is really about urban lands are about 13% of the total land mass of Ottawa right now. So they're talking about adding about half a percentage in order to accommodate 40% increase in population. So we'll see some new communities be built. But there's going to be a significant amount of new buildings coming in. So neighborhoods that used to be strictly single family will likely be upzoned so that you can have multi-units within the same kind of building mass. And then you'll see a majority of apartment buildings, 4 stories, maybe a few higher, centered around major arterials, major collector roads, especially around transit. We've already seen kind of projects and proposals for bigger towers settled right on LRT stations, and that's going to take up a big chunk of the units as well that we need.
So what do you think is going to happen with transit now? Because transit is not really being used very much now, right?
It's hard to tell, with people's, not just COVID, but of course people staying home and working from home. It's still relatively early days to know whether our commuting patterns are going to change significantly. And if it does, that could have a big change on how we want to live as well. Because if we're not all commuting downtown, the need isn't there anymore to intensify down there. So it's still a little too early to tell, I think, overall. But we'll have to see when our initial concerns are over about COVID-19. Will companies still want to continue the pattern we've set up? Like Spotify is saying, it's not going to be hauling all its people down to its downtown office anymore. So we'll see if more take the lead.
Yeah, Shopify.
Shopify, sorry. Yeah, that's it.
I say that all the time. But yeah, no, I was actually just going to bring that up because we actually have a client now that we're doing a custom home for that works for them. And now he's like, oh yeah, since I'm going to be working from home more often, I got to work in a home office now, right? So now we're just about to submit, or we're in the process of that, right? So, and these are things that I think will become more common. Maybe I feel like I think it was you who were talking to about this, is like maybe the footprint of apartments, for example, or homes, they get slightly larger because I don't think it's so much for the people living in single family homes already, but people in apartments, they might need an extra room for an office, right? A couple may not be able to live in a 1-bedroom apartment. It might be a 1-bedroom and a den at least sort of thing, separate room for exactly that, right? So maybe there just becomes a shift where there's less office space downtown, more residential units.
Yeah, there's lots of speculation pieces out there now about even just converting office space that's there to residential, which is not necessarily out of the realm of possibility either. But Ottawa has always struggled with spreading out its employment centers away from downtown. It's always kind of been a goal to get people away from commuting just from the outskirts to into downtown, and this might be a real boost in that.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So with all this happening, there's something called 613 flats.
Right. So staff introduced the idea of the 613 flats as part of a housing typology to intensify. So they're looking again for a lot of missing middle intensification. They're not looking for towers everywhere, big towers on every corner by any means. Ottawa is still going to be a very low-rise city. But one of the ways they want to try to intensify is keeping the building form or the massing about the same size as a single-family home, but getting more families into it. So they've introduced this idea of 613 flats, which would be, say, slightly bigger than a single-family home, but would house, 4 to 6 units in it, whether they're freehold or condos or whatever. And then have multi-families living in it, but in that sort of same size overall. So it's a interesting proposition. It was kind of brought in at the last minute, so the industry really hasn't had much chance to look at it, to kind of consider how well it will go in. Some people love it, some are not so sure, but we'll see how it goes. Already we see sort of long semi-detached homes that have, say, 3 units and then a 4th as an accessory apartment. It's kind of that same model overall. So some neighborhoods have been accepting of that intensification within that sort of single-family neighborhood fabric, and others haven't so much. But it's certainly the way the city staff see us increasing density within sort of that more low-rise neighborhood.
Yeah, so originally I thought 613 was just because of the area code of Ottawa, but it's not. What does it actually stand for again?
It's 6 units, 3 bedrooms, 1 building, I think. I think I've got that, yeah.
Creative. So would this be something that would have, like, is it for like a common design? Like, is it your typical home, or is it something that would just be, if you have this style of home, you could easily get a building permit for it, but we're not looking at the same style of home, like kind of like a prefab is where I'm going. Like, could you do something?
I don't think they've even kind of gone that far down the road with it yet. I think it's more of, okay, you've got a 50 by 100 lot or a 30 by 60 lot. With the zoning that's in place now, what is the envelope that could go in? And then, how could you cut that up into multifamily living? And that's kind of as far as they've brought it so far. Like right now, it wouldn't conform to zoning or any current zoning right now. Like a lot of that work has to happen as well in order for this to get off the ground. Yeah.
So there's a lot of back end stuff, and I'm guessing years of meetings and planning. Like, this stuff doesn't happen quickly.
No, right. For sure. No matter what way the city decides to do its growth management, it's going to be a good year or two for sure to get all the zoning in place in order to get more people into existing neighborhoods.
Right. So another thing that the city's been working on, I believe it was a city, but is energy evolution.
Yes.
Right.
So the city agreed to or signed on to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 100% by 2050. So what it did was took on this project, which is called Energy Evolution, which basically sort of lays out all the actual action items you have to take on in order to get that reduction in place. So there's lots more.
When you say you, is that like the city has to?
I mean the city.
For the city, yeah.
But not the city in a corporate sense, but also the city as in the royal we sense as well. So it touches on much more than housing. It's got solid waste and energy and transportation, and non-residential buildings as well. But there is a residential component there, and there's kind of two parts. One for new buildings, it would be, higher performance standards for new housing that's built. And then for the second part is, existing homes, obviously, and trying to get those those energy retrofits, to get those more commonplace and to really get a good market for them going, which is always, it's been, as you know, it's kind of been a struggle for the past decade to get incentives to get homeowners to invest in that energy retrofit.
Yeah. So this energy evolution is a plan, essentially to make this happen. But as part of that plan, I guess they're talking about incentives for homeowners who want to do retrofits.
Yeah, so we're talking with them about a retrofit accelerator is the word that they've used, and the idea is how we know we've got to address existing homes. They're the ones that have the poorer performance, especially if they've been built before 1990 or so, and that's about over half the stock in town as it is. So the question is the upfront costs are not little, right? It's expensive to invest a lot of money. It takes a lot of capital to do that initial project, but how do you amortize that over time? So that's the real question: is do you try to incentivize it at the front end? Does someone pay for it? Does the city even maybe contribute to part of it to knock down that upfront cost? Does the incentive go to the builders or the renovators who are going to be doing the work? There's also talk about trying to put it onto the title of the house so that the next owner can enjoy the benefits and pay for that little bit as well, because that's always been the concern, right? Is the return on investment.
Yes,
for that kind of thing.
That's exactly where my mind was going. Is whatever you do, just don't create paperwork. Not you, but whatever happens, like paperwork, especially with everything that's happening now. We already have, as a builder, we've been working on all the new safety protocols that we now have to implement, right? So now we all have additional, not just us in the office portion, but our site supervisors need to be documenting, like every time a subtrade, like all these things start to add more and more paperwork. And we've been involved with incentive programs before, and to some extent they weren't worth it for us because we didn't necessarily, as a business, we didn't necessarily make more money, right? Not that that's the only reason why we're doing it, but it added more work without increasing the bottom line. And I don't think we would have really needed it, right? We had other work, so we kind of did it to support some clients. But at the end of the day, it actually added costs and time, and so reduced our bottom line, which didn't help us anyways, right? Mm-hmm. It could have helped other businesses for sure. But it wasn't an easy process. And I think it was partly because it was put together so quickly. It was just a mess, right? So I won't get into exactly what program and all that. But anyways, side note. But that's interesting to see the title portion. Like, is there other cities or states, provinces, anybody doing anything like this right now that we can maybe be, or that we are looking at as examples?
There are. You'll have to forgive me because I don't know exactly the jurisdiction, but it's called the PACE program. Again, I forget kind of the acronym, but the idea is that, the return on investment is you pay for it over a number of years and even multiple owners. The way home ownership works right now, the term people are in their homes isn't necessarily, they're in 10 years, maybe. I think the average is actually even less. But usually their return on investment to support deep energy retrofits is much longer than 10 years. So the idea is, the next person who gets to benefit from your investment, would also end up paying for a little bit. So basically the capital cost would go into into the either property taxes or something like that, so that the cost is spread out over the proper number of years, and it's not a burden of just the one homeowner when others might get to enjoy it later on.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've had. I think it's my bone to pick is with the real estate industry, right? Because they don't see value in better performing, more comfortable homes, right? And until there's value from them, it's really hard to convince home buyers to put money towards something unless they're hardcore into saving the environment or health or whatever it may be, which we've created a niche for ourselves. So a lot of our clients are like that. But the majority of people aren't like that, right? They have to make, including myself, we have to make investments with our money, right?
It's been a real struggle to create that price premium for energy efficiency, for sure, because it's invisible, right? You can't. It's not the same as, a countertop or any upgraded features in a house. So one of the things we've been trying to promote as well, it's not necessarily attached to energy evolution, although we could, especially with the retrofit side, is having mandatory energy audits on resale so that you would get an energy rating for a house. And then, as you compare a house, if one house is, or two houses are virtually the same, but one is $10,000 more, but its ERS rating is higher, then you know that where that $10,000 is going. It's going into the energy performance of that house. So we feel that getting that energy audit on resale would be a significant shift in that kind of market.
Yeah, so that would be amazing to see. It's kind of one of those things where like everyone's going to resist change, right? Unless it's and then once it's kind of like taxes go up, we all kick and scream, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we just accept it, right? COVID-19 happens, all of this stuff had to change. We had nothing we can do about it, so we just have to accept it, right? So it's almost like somebody needs to just say, look, this is what's going to happen. I know you're not happy with me, but you'll be okay in 6 months from now.
I should explain. ERS is EnerGuide rating system, which is a measurement tool to measure the energy performance of a house.
Do you know what happened? Yeah. So that was one thing that was being talked about at one point about being mandatory. So if you were going to go sell your house, you had to go out and get a rating. That was going to be, I think it was going to be free. It was going to be like, it was going to be paid for of some sort of incentive program. Do you know what happened with that? Because last I heard, it just wasn't moving ahead.
Yeah, I don't. I think the question is sort of who does pay that cost to get that $300 test. I don't know exactly what the number is, but who ends up paying that in the end event? So, but it could very well be an incentive because, as you know, if you're any existing home, you have to get the test first before you can do anything. So that kind of where the leaks are, and it gives you a good idea of the next steps you have to take. So it's going to be the fundamental first step moving forward for any retrofit. So we've got to figure it out one way or another.
Within this, well, I guess any of it, is there whether it's the Retrofit Accelerator or any other parts of it, is there anything with regards to like the carbon footprint of homes, for example? Is it only looking at energy performance, or is it also looking at the materials that are being used within the homes?
There has been a lot of, when it was originally brought up, it looked mostly at energy. There has been a lot of focus now on carbon as well. Even say CHBA's net zero, is starting to think about carbon. Obviously, the Canada Green Building Council looks at carbon and has a couple of add-ons. Or it feels that it has add-ons that for net zero that it could really put in as well. So there's kind of that exploratory work happening, but I don't think they've kind of captured it for the regular sort of everyday understanding as of yet. But it's certainly something that's in the mind of sort of that bleeding edge of green renovator or builder.
Yeah, because I think that's another thing, right? Because there's a lot of really good products out there, but because they're not readily available, they're more expensive, right?
Yeah.
And until the demand for them starts to increase, the price won't decrease. right? Mm-hmm. So it's always like the chicken and egg game, right? I'm always of the mind, like you go to the grocery store, you buy something, that's your vote, right? Whatever you spend your money on, that's what you're voting to have more of, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're spending money on products that are harming the environment, more products that are harming the environment are going to be produced, right? But if we're willing to, draw a line in the sand and say, look, I'm not going to buy that, I'm going to buy this, then we can start to see some change. But to some extent, I still think it's got to be like almost mandatory in some cases. But I know it's easier said than done.
Right.
I definitely get it. I see both sides for sure, or three sides.
I think one of the things the association is good at is kind of bringing up, the majority of builders to a higher standard, above code, especially, and then, their emphasis is then bringing up building code after that to kind of get the slaggards and the ones who are dragging their feet.
Yeah. So this proposal would be like basically there's the Ontario Building Code, but this would be above and beyond that if you're building within Ottawa, correct?
Right. So in Toronto, there's a Toronto Green Standard. If anyone who's watching is familiar with that, it's a kind of the similar idea where there would be a higher performance standard, for a new home in Ottawa. Still, obviously, within building code jurisdiction. But so the question again is sort of what's reasonable, what can be like you say, what's mass marketable. What can be done reasonably well without a significant amount of additional cost.
Right. So what are you seeing in terms of the future? There's a lot of uncertainty right now and with jobs, with events happening, with construction and things opening back up, the economy and so forth. I guess a couple things, how do you see this affecting, we'll stick with the construction industry and maybe even the city as a whole. How do you see everything changing based on what you know now? And maybe how is this affecting you? I'm liking the beard.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. It gave me an opportunity to try it out. So
yeah,
I could hide away for a couple of weeks and grow it out and then come and then, announce myself to the world again. So, I don't think Ottawa is going to see a significant impact. Ottawa has always kind of been its own little bubble, partly because it just regionally, it doesn't have a lot of major competitors nearby. Montreal, Toronto are far enough away. But it's also, obviously, it's a government town. It's got a kind of a solid tech base again. Because of those, that steady employment, it's got high education, relative household incomes. Because of that, the demand for housing here is not going to dip the way it might in other cases, in other parts of the city, right? In the country. So I expect the housing markets to stay relatively uniform. Here, we might get a bit of a slowdown, but nothing outrageous by any means. And that's, I think, any bit slowdown, you've kind of seen it in resales, is really kind of more consumer confidence about going out and visiting homes and that sort of thing, which you can't even really do right now. So as we, kind of go along, I don't expect there to be any real hardship in terms of the housing markets here.
And what do you foresee happening with renovations or even events within GOBA? Because GOBA used to do almost an event every month, right? Mm-hmm. Where are you seeing those things changing?
Our events have definitely, and we had to, basically shut down everything. And most of our events are now like this, doing it online, in Zoom chat rooms and what have you. But, and there's more of those, and that's great because it actually gives us a chance to bring in different kinds of speakers to talk about different projects, different opportunities, and bring in people we wouldn't normally have done so, ones who have kind of pioneered a lot of this technology and have been doing this for a long time. Even actually on Thursday, there's a webinar from RBC and PMA Breather who do housing market analysis that we're doing for for members this Thursday. So we'll get a chance to have a conversation with them, and that's not usually something we do at this time of year. So it'll be great to see what the housing numbers they'll present that right then and there. I think
I missed that invite. I'm going to have to get that.
Oh, yeah.
I get too many emails, and I probably just
that's the problem. Everything is by email right now, so it's difficult to see.
Yeah.
But in terms of renovation, beyond the energy efficiency, which I do think is going to be a really big thing, always one of the driving forces behind renovation has been that livable space, as it was before. And I think, if anything, now that push on will be even more so now for people who are going to be tempted to stay home in their homes for longer periods and maybe not go away on vacation as much. So they're going to want that space that they're occupying to be as functional and as enjoyable as possible. So there might be more push to that way about renovations. Like in the past couple of years, we saw a big increase or at least I saw a bigger focus on outdoor living space. Transforming that backyard into, practically a 3-season area to be outside, right? So there's a big part of that as well. And then the other part I think renovations is always push on is aging in place. People are getting older, but they're tending not to move out of their homes. They're staying in their homes. So they have to get a renovation to make things easier, more accessible, bring a bedroom down to the main floor, anything that they can do to allow them to stay in their home even longer. And that's really been one of the big pushes for renovations and will continue to be, obviously, as the population gets older.
Yeah, I see like a lot of cottages, cottage sales going up, for example. I think someone was telling me the RV sales are going up too, right? Because it's like the safe way to travel now, where you don't have to go into big public places or hotels or resorts or anything like that, right? You kind of have your own space that you clean and maintain yourself. So that's all great. So from for any of the homeowners, for example, watching, if they're in Ottawa, if they wanted to learn more about everything that we've been talking about, because it might affect them because they are living somewhere where the zoning could change, where could they go to find out more about this stuff?
You'll have to probably wait a little bit yet. What's going to happen is nearer the end of the year, late fall, or into November, December, when the draft official plan comes out from the city, what they will also be including is intensification mapping. So there'll be maps of the city, again, identifying major arterials, corridors, transit nodes around, bus rapid transit and LRT, and that'll give you an idea of where they're expecting to up zone. So from whatever your zoning is now, if it's single family or 4-story or what have you, and where they expect to up zone to 9-story or whatever it's going to be, or upzone your single family area to 4 stories, say. And then that'll give you an idea of where intensification could happen over the long term, right? This is planned for 25 years. This isn't going to be something where everyone is going to all of a sudden have significant buildings next to them tomorrow. But eventually, everybody is going to see intensification, and everyone is going to see more people living in their neighborhoods in order to accommodate just the sheer population growth that we're going to see. We're almost, it's 40% increase in population, with the majority of them being accommodated within existing neighborhoods. So we're going to see different types of housing for sure, more multifamily in neighborhoods. And that's
40% increase over how long?
Over 25 years.
Okay.
So until 2046. So it's going to, it's a significant increase in population. There's a lot of people coming, which is great. And we need to have houses for them all. So, everywhere is going to see more people. And, density in any city kind of works from the core and then goes outward. So the places that are hot right now will continue to be hot, for a little while. Westboro, Mechanicsville, those kind of areas are going to still see more intensification. But as you kind of spread out from the hard, the deep core there, it's going, that intensification will start spreading out to wider and wider areas.
My investment brain's going, it's like, all right, where should we be looking right now, right? So, that's always working. So, yeah, there's going to be a ton of, obviously you can look at the negative side of things and, say, oh, my community is going to be full of people, or there's going to be construction beside me, or whatever it may be, but there's also going to be a lot of opportunities and great things happening with all of this, right? So that, all of this work that's required also creates jobs within the city, right? The construction industry supports a lot of people throughout the city, which ultimately keeps the economy going for all sorts of different things, right? So all sorts of different jobs. Although the CERB isn't necessarily helping the labor jobs, maybe. Might be hard to find those unless you're paying more and able to keep them busy right now. I heard restaurants can't find dishwashers because, well, they make more money sitting at home right now, but that's another side note. So anyways, lots of really good things happening right now. I know on another event, one of the great events that GOBA does for us renovators and custom home builders, well, if you're also a renovator, is the Reno Tour, where we would do this every October, and we'd go to a project that we had done, talk to the homeowners, and open the doors to give tours to people for one day across the city. Whoever was a Renomark member could put in a project, and all the proceeds would go to Habitat for Humanity. But it's another event that's not going to happen this year, at least not the way that we typically do it, right?
No, not last year was our biggest year. We had 9 projects, I believe, in total. Enough that you couldn't visit them all in the single day that the 6 hours it was open, which is great because it gave you a real range. The thing I like about Reno Tour the most is I think like myself, and I think like most people, I have a hard time kind of visualizing a lot of things sometimes. That's why, say the model rooms at IKEA are good, because you kind of see everything brought together, right? But it's the same way as, the Reno Tour, much like kind of visiting a house when you're shopping for a home. You can see it right there. You can see pictures of what it used to be. You can see how it functions now. The best thing about Reno Tour, of course, is that the builder who did, the renovator who did it is right there. You can, ask them questions. And it's a really insightful way to get some ideas. And it's never not the same project either. So, there are some basements, there are kitchens, there are bathrooms, there are additions, there are sunrooms. There's a bit of everything. So if you've got a particular idea, like a bathroom, then you can just visit the bathrooms, or if you want to see all the ones in your area to see, what's been done in a house similar to yours, then you could go to those. So that's always the great thing about Reno Tour. So what we're hoping to do this year, I don't think anyone's going to feel confident to go and visit a bunch of houses with the crowds at this point. Even come October. So what we're going to do is kind of more like a virtual open house or home show or home tour that you can do for a resale home. We're hoping to replicate that experience with Reno Tour and show the renovations, get a little insight and testimonials from the people who were built, and hopefully have renovators to be able to kind of answer a few questions at a given time too. That would be ideal. So we're hoping that that kind of gives people a similar experience to Reno Tour, again, to give them that idea if they're looking for inspiration, or if they're looking for how their vague idea might actually be executed. Reno Tour has always been good for that, and we're looking to replicate it even just virtually.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how we could pull that off, because that would be interesting to be a part of for sure.
Yeah.
Any parting words that you are asked, requests of the people watching right now?
No, just, if you're interested in a new home or interested in a renovation, go to goba.ca. It's gohba.ca. There are, the people there and the companies that you find that are GOBA members are dedicated to professional development and a high quality level of service. The consumer experience. This is a voluntary association, so they join to improve themselves, and they improve by being part of things, and they learn, and they're, this is the mark of quality to join, to be part of this. So, much like Casey or anyone else who's a member, they this is the dedication. This is how you show that you're committed to putting out a higher quality product, is being part of the association. That's how you get better. So I encourage anyone who's looking again for new home or to renovate their home to reach out to a GOBA member.
Yeah, and as part of GOBA, the renovators are also part of something called Renomark. So you can also check out Renomark. I believe it's Renomark.ca.
Renomark.ca.
Yeah. So there's another great resource as well. And well, if you're not in Ottawa, or there's GOBA is a part of, if you're in Canada, right? GOBA is a part of the Ontario Home Builders Association, and then Canadian Home Builders Association. So there's definitely a local Home Builders Association wherever you live. Even if you're in the U.S., you can find some sort of association. And I would put out there for any of the contractors or younger guys that are thinking of becoming a contractor, I'm a big advocate for joining home builders associations and actually partaking in them, right? Because it's one of those things where you only get out of it what you put into it, right? So I actually I'm one of the younger guys that sit around the table for the most part, not the only one, but there's a lot of people who join and then don't actually take advantage of the opportunity and maybe join the committees or whatever it may be. But that's where you start to learn and start to realize that your so-called competition isn't really your competition, because there's more than enough work for everybody. We're just there to make the industry better, right? So I'm a big fan. So Jason, thank you so much for doing what you do, because it is very important. And like I said, I wouldn't be able to sit and through all these things to do what you do. So I'm glad that you're doing it and having fun doing it and able to articulate everything so well. So yeah, thank you so much for all the work that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on and being such a good ambassador for renovators and for GOBA members in general.
Yeah, my pleasure.